Hello and welcome to Advancing Pawn. In this video, I'm going to analyze one of my own online games. It's a short one, a checkmate on 13th move. Doesn't happen too often. And also, I thought the game gave some very interesting positions for analysis, and it's worth sharing in this video. Let's see how the game goes. E4, C5, Sicilian defense, NF3, D6, and white goes C3. This is Sicilian defense, delayed Alapin variation. And for C3, black responds with NC6. Here, Stockfish thinks NF6 is the best choice for black. After NF6, white's E4 pawn, which is unsupported, comes under attack. But white can simply ignore the attack and play something like bishop to E2. And black cannot capture the pawn on E4. If black captures knight cross E4, it's a blunder because queen to A4 check. The knight on E4 is lost. Let's go back. Instead of bishop to E2, white can also play something like QC2, supporting the E4 pawn, or bishop to B5 check is also playable. Anyway, black did not play NF6. Black actually played NC6 in the game. And then D4, C cross D4, C cross D4, and here black goes G6 with the idea of developing bishop to G7. Here Stockfish thinks the second time in this game that knight to F6 is actually the best move available for black. And for the second time in this game, black doesn't find Stockfish's recommended best move. G6 is actually played in the game. White goes knight to C3. White also hasn't found the engine's best move. Engine recommends D5 here, attacking the knight on C6 right away. As per the engine, it's a plus 1.5 advantage to white here, which is significant after just 6 moves. And C3, the actual move in the game. And now black responds with knight to F6. Interestingly, in this position, engine doesn't think NF6 is the best move. There were a couple of times in the previous moves where the engine recommended NF6 and black didn't find it. And now the engine thinks bishop to G7 is the best move available. Now that black has already opened G6, giving way for the bishop. NF6. White plays bishop to B5. Here, white is holding about a 0.75 advantage, which is good. But the advantage could have been even bigger if white had played D5. For the second time in this game, engine thinks D5 for white is best and white doesn't find it. Let's see how this continuation could have gone. Knight under knight is under attack on c6. Let's say knight to e5, knight cross e5, cross e5, and you can see that black's pawn structure is somewhat broken, and also with black's idea of developing bishop to g7, its own pawn is blocking the diagonal, rendering a bishop on g7 less powerful. So here, according to Stockfish, it's a plus 1.5 advantage to white. White actually played bishop to b5, still an advantage, but just half of what it would have been after d5. The problem with bishop to b5 is that a simple response a6 from black would mean that the bishop is forced to go back or exchange against the knight on c6. But fortunately for white, black did not play a6. Black played bishop to d7 instead. And again, after a zigzag, white is up again with a plus 1.5 advantage. White finally plays d5, but interestingly, now Stockfish doesn't think d5 is the best choice. Just like how it happened for black, Stockfish recommended nf6 a couple of times in the game when the player didn't find it. And finally, when nf6 was indeed played, the engine didn't think it was the best move. Same thing for white here. d5 was recommended a couple of times before, but finally, when white does play d5, it doesn't appear to be the best choice. The best choice would have been e5 here. Let's see how this continuation is likely to go. D cross e5, d cross e5, and the knight at f6 is attacked. It doesn't have the central squares available. Let's say knight goes to g4, adding an attack on e5 pawn. But after bishop to f4, the engine thinks white is quite strong in this position. Let's go back. White doesn't play e5 here, which appears to be the best move. White plays d5 instead, which is still advantage white. Knight to e5, knight cross e5, d cross e5, white castles, bishop cross b5, recaptures on b5. Now, nc3 knight was the only piece supporting white's pawn on e4. So after white recaptures bishop on b5, the support to e4 is lost. But then black shouldn't capture e4. Black did take knight cross e4, which is a big mistake because after queen a4, the knight at e4 is attacked, and also when white knight moves out, it's going to be a discovered check on the king at e8. Even worse, if knight goes to c7, it's a double check to the black king on e8. White could also have played qc2 here, which is quite powerful. It attacks the knight at e4 as well, and also it adds support to the c7 square, so white knight can go nc7 check next, forking the rook on a8. Okay, white actually plays qa4, which is quite powerful. White is clearly winning in this position. And now black follows up a mistake with another blunder, knight to c5, which means knight to c7 is immediate checkmate. Both of white's checking pieces are under attack. Black's knight at c5 is attacking queen on a4. Likewise, black's queen is attacking the knight on c7, but neither of the checking pieces can be captured because it's a double check. So black's king has to run away to safety first. And unfortunately for black, it's surrounded by its own pieces, blocking all exit squares. d7 is the only square that's open, but it's controlled by white's queen as well, which means it's checkmate. Just for theoretical purposes, white could have delivered a checkmate by going to d6 as well, and d6 checkmate. So white had two different moves to finish the game off, and white went nc7 mate. Instead of knight to c5 for black, the engine thinks the best defense available is queen to d7 here. It just delays the eventuality. White is still clearly winning after queen to d7. Let me show you a sample continuation because it's quite interesting how the game can potentially go forward from here. Bishop to e3. Let's say rook to c8. I'm not always choosing the engine's recommended moves here, just showing a possible continuation that looks quite interesting to me with various possibilities. RF c1, and let's say black chooses to exchange off to dilute the attack. After c1, after c1, and let's say bishop to g7 with the intention of castling to take black king to safety and also to bring the final rook into action. But at this stage, white should not allow black to castle. So white goes knight to c7, check. Let's say king d8. And now, interestingly, white can sacrifice its knight with knight e6 check. And if black takes knight with f cross e6, white can follow it up with one more sacrifice, bishop to b6 check. Here, black cannot take across b6 because queen to a8 is lethal. So let's say king e8. And now for the third consecutive move, white can make a sacrifice, this time sacrifice of the biggest piece on the board, white's queen, with d cross e6. And black cannot take the queen. If black takes queen cross a4, rook to c8 is checkmate. So it's quite interesting in this continuation that white is able to make three sacrifices in a row. Knight to e6, minor piece sacrifice, and after black takes, bishop to b6, another minor piece sacrifice, king e8, and finally a queen sacrifice with d cross e6. Let's go back. So yeah, in this position, queen to d7 was the best possible defense. But as you saw in a sample continuation, white is still clearly winning anyway. But black actually played nc5, meaning the next white move was an immediate checkmate Black's defense, it was a 5-minute game, so there was not a lot of time in each move to stop and give it a deep thought. But NC5 meant NC7 was checkmate. I hope you enjoyed the video and learned something along with me in the analysis. I'll see you in the next video from Advancing Pawn. Thank you for watching.